Greetings. The title of this lecture is Culture Wars. Throughout much of the 20th century, fundamentalists were wary of the secular forces coming out of Hollywood movies. Many fundamentalists stayed away from movie theaters. For example, as late as the mid 1960s, Wheaton College students Wheaton College forbid students and faculty from attending movies. As fundamentalism became more politically active in the late 20th century, clashes between fundamentalism and Hollywood increased in number and intensity. The most serious battle occurred over Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ, a very controversial film released in 1988. What is especially stunning about this clash was how oblivious Scorsese and his supporters were on the pain that such a film would cause for Bible believing Christians. Its release and opposition by the Christian right marked a key moment in America's cultural war. Greek poet and novelist Nikos Kazantzakis saw his novel The Last Temptation published in 1955. In another work, Kazantzakis wrote, quote, "It is not God who will save us. It is we who will save God, battling by creating and by transmuting matter into spirit." End of quote. He did not follow the biblical account in his novel. In the novelist's audacious version, Jesus turns against the commandments, refuses to go to the synagogue, builds crosses for Romans crucifixions, and in a dream sequence on the cross, denies his resurrection to Paul and marries Mary Magdalene. Renamed as The Last Temptation of Christ, the novel arrived in American bookstores in 1960. In the 1970s, Martin Scorsese became interested in adapting the novel to film. Writer Paul Schrader, coming from a Dutch Reformed Church background, wrote a draft screenplay. Seeking to understand Jesus better, he drew on the work of liberal scholars. He saw Jesus as a true subversive. Schrader wrote shocking scenes. During the Last Supper, the bread and wine becomes blood and flesh in the mouths of the disciples who cough up the bloody mess. There was also a scene where Jesus and Mary Magdalene make erotic love. As author Thomas Lithloff writes, Schrader played the part of the provocateur to the hilt. The road to film completion was long. Paramount invested about $2 million into the project before pulling the plug. Initially, Paramount Studio president Michael Eisner and president of Worldwide Production Jeffrey Katzenberg supported the project. Katzenberger recalled later, "I don't think any of us thought that it was going to have the level of controversy that it did have. It was not meant to undermine or take a negative interpretation of people's faith." One executive asked whether making the film was a socially responsible thing to do. Eisner, Katzenberg, and Barry Diller, Paramount's chairman, were hardly qualified to ask the question. Not only were all three men raised as Jews, they were secularists in sensibility and lifestyle. This was a quote from the work by Thomas Whitlock. In order to get a better sense of the sensitive nature of the film, Paramount set up a theological seminar of 4 theologians to discuss the film. The only problem was that all 4 were liberal. On the issue of opposition from conservative Christians, the advice of one was to, quote, ignore the lunatics. One of the 4 was a Catholic feminist, and she voiced some caution. She suggested that the film put the sexual relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, quote, in the context of marriage and family, so that becomes the predominant matter. The conclusion of the 4 theologians was that the screenplay was not blasphemous. Fundamentalists and conservative Christians, however, did score a victory. As a result of an onslaught of letters sent complaining about the film project, Paramount canceled it. Scorsese was devastated, but was determined to go ahead somehow. The next stop was Universal, the flagstaff label of the MCA Motion Picture Group. Thomas Pollack, chairman of Universal, saw The Last Temptation of Christ as a religious version of the film It's a Wonderful Life. Pollack stated, quote, I always felt that what was going on in The Last Temptation of Christ is that the temptation Satan offers on the cross is the temptation to give up the divine and live out your life as a human, end of quote. By choosing the right path, Jesus in the film and novel provides, quote, a model for all of us in our own everyday temptations. At least this is what Pollack claimed years later as a justification of supporting the film project. Pollack also explained, quote, what was going on in my mind is that aside from the fact that I did believe in the project from a commercial standpoint as well as an aesthetic standpoint, if I could figure out a way to do it at a price that made sense, not only would I bring in Scorsese to Universal, but we would be able to work on more lucrative films, end of quote. There was one weak leak, however. Could Universal find enough theaters to show the finished project? A key recent development was MCA's purchase of 49.7% of the outstanding shares of the Cineplex Odeon Corporation, a Canada-based theater chain that had almost 1,700 screens in approximately 500 locations in the United States and Canada. The CEO was Garth Drabinsky. Drabinsky accepted an offer to invest in The Last Temptation of Christ as a 50% equity partner. Drabinsky assumed that the film would eventually play on network television and that a big video chain like Blockbuster would offer it on its shelves. The deal was essential. Pollack doubted that the film would have got the green light without the partnership of Cineplex. When the film was first released, Drabinsky worked hard to get the film shown in important markets. Opposition to the film project came from a number of conservative activists. One tenacious media watchdog was Donald Waldman, a folksy Methodist minister who founded the National Federation of Decency, a nonprofit organization that fought anti-Christian biases and the, quote, mind-poisoning junk food, quote, end of quote, of television. In 1981, his organization joined with the moral majority, and out of this came the Coalition for Better Television. Wildman showed Jerry Falwell a dollar bill and said, quote, "The networks don't care about your moral values, but they care about this," holding up the dollar bill. The coalition disbanded the following year, but it did score an impressive victory when they pressured Procter and Gamble to pull out of several primetime shows identified by the coalition as violent, sexual, or profane. From his headquarters in Mississippi, Wildman and the American Family Association, renamed, this was formerly the NFD, followed the trade coverage of the Scorsese project. Now that was in play again. In 1987, letters of protest began streaming to the MCA Universal at a rate of hundreds per week. Universal adopted the following strategy with the Christian right: don't judge us until you see the movie. Born-again Christian Tim Penland, who had played an important role in successfully marketing Chariots of Fire and The Mission, two films that he marketed to evangelical communities, was hired by Universal to help as an advisor with The Last Temptation of Christ. Universal promised that the Scorsese film would be faith affirming. Penland contacted Wildman and had him halt his direct mail campaign on the basis that Universal would allow an advanced screening no later than June 1988. The two evangelicals believed that Universal would incorporate their input on the film. In discussion with one Universal executive on the topic of heaven and hell, Penland explained that everyone would have to answer for their actions in the end. Universal also enlisted the service of another consultant connected to liberal religious community. Josh Barron, a former Zen Buddhist, was given a draft of the screenplay. Unfortunately, Penland had signed on without reading the script. In an interview years later, Barron stated, quote, "It became clear to me that this was going to be the most controversial film released by any studio in the history of the movie business. In fact, I couldn't sleep a couple of nights. I just thought, this thing's going to explode. They have no idea what they have here. They have no clue." And my initial reaction was a little bit like, I can't believe they're making this film. And the thought was, who approved this? And how did this happen? What was going through their minds when they decided to make this film? End of quote. In Barron's understanding, the script deviated from the Gospels on so many key points that it would push every button imaginable for any biblically oriented Christian. Universal executives were skeptical with this assessment, and Chairman Pollock wanted Barron to help the studio make the film more controversial. Barron was astonished that they did not understand. Barron prepared a positioning paper to be used for a future response, but Universal viewed it as a waste of time. Although Wildman kept to his agreement of not opposing the film until the advanced screening, various radio personalities at Christian radio stations began discussing the film as anti Christian. Tim Penland finally received a copy of the script, and on 80 of the 120 pages, he marked scenes that were problematic. Penland was conflicted. He wanted to be a bridge builder, but realized the film was going too far with revisionism. Universal did not embrace his suggestions for changes. He later resigned, and some suggest that he had accepted a fool's errand. When Wildman received a bootleg version of the script, he responded, "Never in almost 12 years of fighting the media's bias against Christian values had I ever come across a more blatant attack on Christianity than this movie. I realized that if there was ever a time for Christians to let the Hollywood elite know what the entertainment industry's constant Christian bashing should stop, this was it." In July, quoted in the Los Angeles Times, Wildman stated, "What Universal wanted was controversy. They wanted it to help fill the theaters. They had intentionally used me for several months." The, the American Family Association, Campus Crusade for Christ, Focus on the Family, and Master Media International were a few of a number of Christian organizations that increased their opposition to the film. On his radio program, heard on over 1,000 stations across America, Dr. James Dobson declared, quote, "If you've been reading your papers, you are aware that this movie was coming. You may not have known how bad it was. I will confess to you, I had no idea how evil it was. I still have not seen it, and yet I am getting bits and pieces now of what's in this film. And it would appear to be the most blasphemous, evil attack on the church and the cause of Christ in the history of entertainment." End of quote. He also added, quote, I would hate to be in their shoes, to tell you the truth, because they really haven't taken on us. I mean, who cares? They've taken on the king of the universe. God is not mocked. And I don't know how long it will take him to speak, but he will speak. The universe has a boss, and you don't do that to him. End of quote. The Dobson radio program of July 11 marked a watershed. Conservative Christians across the nation now were aware of the film. Bill Bright, president of Campus Crusade, had offered to buy the film for $10 million so it could be destroyed. Universal responded it was a First Amendment freedom of speech and religion argument. The studio believed it could claim the high moral ground. The national media were swayed by the First Amendment argument. Another tactic of the Christian right was to encourage a boycott of the MCA. Falwell declared, "Be assured that I will work day and night during the next several months to see it becomes unprofitable for any theater to show this film." One fundamentalist church in Los Angeles adopted hardball tactics, and tactics including targeting Lou Wasserman, who was the CEO of MCA. The Reverend R.L. Heimers Jr. of the Fundamentalist Baptist Tabernacle picketed outside Universal with signs such as, quote, Wiser Men fans hatred towards the Jews with Temptation movie. Another one was Wiser Men fans anti-Semitism and Wiser Men endangers Israel. Heimers explained these Jewish producers with a lot of money are taking a swipe at our religion. Of course, it's going to cause a backlash. Why throw gasoline on the fires of religious intolerance, particularly in this time when Israel needs the support of the Christian community? End of quote. And of course, as historical studies show, that the fundamentalist movement favored Israel, favored the Jews, a lot of it coming from their literal interpretation of the Bible. Jerry Falwell likewise believed that the film would create a wave of anti Semitism in this country. Such rhetoric sent off alarm bells in Jewish communities. Opponents of the Christian right argued that Heimers and Falwell seemed to court the very outcome they warned against. Universal sought to gain the approval of mainline churches. Those in liberal religious circles who Universal approached to get their opinion on the film found it difficult to understand why the film was being called blasphemous. One liberal admitted he was not familiar with the Gospels. The Reverend Robert Thompson, minister of an American Baptist church in Illinois, gave more than 40 television, print, and radio interviews in support of the film. Actor Willem Dafoe, who played Jesus, could not understand the negative reactions to the Last Temptation of Christ. He thought it was, quote, a beautiful, powerful, positive film. Michael Mann referred to the dissenting Christians as, quote, thought police. One journalist referred to protesters as, quote, a bunch of holier than thou twits. Liberals were quick to characterize protesters as narrow-minded fundamentalists, which in turn obscured a deep understanding of why the fundamentalists objected to the film. In August 1988, when the film was released, Scorsese and Waldman faced off on ABC's Nightline. Scorsese stated he was a Catholic and he argued that anyone has the right to explore God in their own way. Waldman responded that offended Christians had the right to protest, quote, what had been done to their Lord. A number of theater chains across the nation chose not to show the film. For example, General Cinema Corporation, the third largest theater operation, did not show the film. The film was never shown in commercial release in many American cities, including Cincinnati, Louisville, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Orlando, and Nashville, to name a few. The Canadian opening at Toronto's York Theatre was peaceful with only 7 protesters. Openings in the United States often drew protesters numbering in the hundreds. While there were only a few incidents of property damage at theaters, the emotions demonstrated between protesters and movie participants were electric. Universal had to foot the bill of approximately $1 million for security guards. Garth Drabinsky thought the whole issue of having security guards was overblown. In fact, in December 1988, after the episode had finally died down, much to the anger of MCA Universal, Drabinsky told the Variety magazine that the movie would be released again in the spring of 1989. This never happened. In fact, Video chains such as Blockbuster refused to offer the movie on its shelves. Scorsese admitted that he did not realize that the film would be as controversial as it was. Playing in only 140 theaters, the film grossed a little over 8 million, placing it in the bottom 10 of 1988 top 100 releases. It made less than 1 million in profit. The American Family Association, fierce opponent of the movie, reported an income of 3.2 million in 1988, which represented more than a 30% increase. In one assessment, Christianity Today wrote, if the goal of protests against The Last Temptation was to discourage people from seeing the movie, it failed. On the other hand, if the goals of the protests were to increase public awareness of the importance of Christ's divinity to American Christians, the protest was a rousing success. It is interesting to note that Jeffrey Katzenberg, who became part of DreamWorks, welcomed Christian consultation on the making of the animation film Prince of Egypt. With The Last Temptation of Christ, the Christian right took a clear stand. But Hollywood did not relent. Hollywood has not relented. Christianity in a positive light is rarely the case in Hollywood films. Now, I want to turn to another topic to finish up the lecture, and that is the divide in regards to evangelicals, some who claim to be on the left. We have a showdown taking place in recent years between liberal Protestants and conservative Christians. Recent data on church growth reveal that churches accommodating to secular culture have lost massive numbers as far as memberships. The United Methodists, the Episcopalians, and the United Church of Christ, and many other churches accepting liberal theology, all have lost a significant number of church members. But for conservative Christians, there are also worrisome signs in some evangelical denominations. For example, many young people raised in evangelical homes have rejected the biblical definition of marriage between a man and a woman. Even at the cost of declining church memberships and weakened evangelical institutions, many young people are tolerant with the idea of evangelical churches and schools traveling down a path inconsistent with what the Bible teaches. The culture war as a topic has generated many books, both at the academic and popular levels. One popular book that offers a good introduction to liberal ideas and the church is Chelson Vicari's Distortion: How the New Christian Left is Twisting the Gospel and Damaging the Faith. In an engaging manner, in her 2014 book, Vicari covers a broad number of topics in three parts: the crisis, digging into the issues, and preventing the collapse. Early in the book, one learns that Vicari grew up in an Assemblies of God church and fell under the spell of liberal Protestant, quote, feel good doctrine during her college years. A dazzling Christianity replaced old-fashioned conservative evangelicalism. Classic Christian orthodoxy was less appealing compared to religious practices that made one feel good. And the message did not necessarily need to be biblical. In fact, worldly focus had advantages. Popular liberal evangelical leaders explained that when young evangelicals accepted abortion and same sex marriage, the media, academia, and Hollywood would reciprocate and accept them. Besides, it was better than the alternative. It was better than being dubbed intolerant or uncompassionate. Several progressive Protestants that Vicari identify include Brian McLaren, leader of the Emergent Movement, Jim Wallace, founders of the left-wing activist magazine from the 70s, Jim Wallace, lobbyist Richard Cizik, Oprah Winfrey's colleague Rob Bell, social justice activist Shane Claiborne, and ethicist David Gushee. Vicari devotes a chapter to same-sex marriage. Her discussion begins with a Francis Schaeffer quote, "People drift along from generation to generation, and the morally unthinkable becomes thinkable as the years move on." Recognizing the difficulty of the issue, Vicari encourages compassion without compromise. Christians are to love and minister to, quote, "our gay neighbors while still upholding God's model of sexuality, marriage, and family," end of quote. Her message is that we should care about culture stability and also the souls of all human beings. As sinners, Christians engaging the issue of same-sex marriage must do so prayerfully. Vicari points out, quote, "The reality is that all of us are by nature fallen and broken and need of redemption and forgiveness." Another helpful chapter is on the social justice facade. Conservative Christians who care about poverty and the fewer employment opportunities for people of all ages are bewildered about the inroads of, quote, "sheepskin socialism" in church circles. At a campus church, Vicari heard all about the evils of the free market system. What has become common is progressive evangelicals armed with their buzzwords such as social justice, inequality, and marginalized, but these same people show no evidence of reading books or considering evidence-based research that exposes the myth of socialism. Vicari suggests that the strategy to gain followers for a leftist political agenda is to add the word justice to left-wing political ideas and, quote, "hope no one notices." And this happens at Christian colleges, pitched by Christ-professing faculty and staff. Years ago, historian Mark Knoll had good reasons to write his book, "The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind." Chapters on both feminism and abortion are warnings of the bad theology of liberal Protestantism. Vicari argues that Christian women are already liberated, not by ideology or a worldly status, but by Jesus Christ. As for the issue of abortion, fortunately, many millennials are recognizing abortion's deadly reality. Religious liberty is an important issue discussed in the chapter on Christian persecution. Bible believing Christians must stand strong in the face of attacks by atheist activists and government legislation that forces faith based institutions to compromise their biblical position. Quote, when God is removed from society, something else takes his place, and that something is not peace, justice, or unity. End of quote. Chelson Vickery concludes the distortion on a positive note, presenting brief profiles of 6 young evangelicals living out their faith boldly. As one millennial declared, quote, we can see God working powerfully through his spirit in the hearts of Christians and unbelievers alike, drawing us to take part in his glorious kingdom purposes. The challenge is straightforward. Quote, arming ourselves with scripture, prayer, and courage, keeping our compassion yet never compromising our convictions, and representing Christ even when it's inconvenient and costly. But Carey's warning and message are not new. For over 100 years, fundamentalists and other conservative Christians have wrestled with the issue on how one stays true to the Bible in a culture that has little patience or tolerance for biblical orthodoxy. The culture wars will continue, but Bible believing Christians can find much historical literature on the many strategies of coping with a society that thinks it can separate believers from their Lord and Savior. And I'm just conclude there. Thank you.